I hadn't expected the weekend to mean anything. All I wanted was a quiet escape, just a few days at my friend Daniel's family lake house, far from the noise of the city and the weight that had been pressing on my chest for weeks. My relationship with Mark had slipped into a strange silence, one we both pretended not to hear. I told myself this trip would help me clear my head, maybe even remind me of who I was before everything felt so uncertain. Daniel greeted me with his usual enthusiasm the moment I stepped out of the car. He hugged me so tightly it almost chased away the heaviness clinging to me. "You look like you need this," he said, and I didn't bother denying it. The lake house stood tall behind him, wrapped in aging wood and framed by towering pines. The water shimmered a deep green under the afternoon sun, calm and inviting, nothing like the fast-burning tension I'd left behind at home. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and something warm, like old memories. Daniel walked me through the house, pointing out little changes he'd made since my last visit: the repaired railing, the new lamp, the stack of board games he insisted we would not be leaving untouched. His energy filled the place, but my mind drifted every few minutes to the phone in my pocket. Still no message from Mark. That I pushed the thought away that we had barely settled in when the sound of an approaching car rolled across the gravel. Daniel glanced out the window and grinned. "Looks like my brother decided to show up after all." I remembered him telling me that Lucas might stop by, but I hadn't paid much attention at the time. He was the older brother who spent most of his life drifting between jobs, cities, and quiet places where he could breathe, as Daniel always put it. I had never met him, only heard fragments, all spoken with admiration mixed with confusion. Daniel once admitted he didn't fully understand his brother but loved him anyway. Lucas stepped inside carrying a duffel bag slung over one shoulder. He was taller than Daniel, with a composed expression that made him seem both guarded and gentle at the same time. His eyes scanned the room before landing on me. "You must be Ethan," he said, offering his hand. His voice was calm, steady, as if he weighed each word before releasing it. That I shook his hand, trying not to stare. "Yeah, Daniel's mentioned you." "Hopefully only the good parts," Lucas replied, a soft smile tugging at his mouth. Daniel laughed. "Ethan knows everything. Even the time you tried to turn the garage into a meditation studio." "Which worked," Lucas said mildly. "Until you filled it with paint cans." Their banter eased some part of me I hadn't realized was tense. That we spent the next hour unpacking groceries and arranging things around the house. Lucas moved with an unhurried confidence, taking in details without calling attention to himself. He asked me simple questions: what I did for work, how long I'd known Daniel, and listened as though the answers mattered more than polite conversation required. I found myself talking more than I expected, maybe because his attention felt sincere, free from the half-distracted replies I'd grown used to from Mark. When Daniel stepped outside to fix the dock light, the house fell into a soft quiet. I sat near the window, watching the sun dip lower over the lake. Lucas approached and leaned against the opposite wall, eyes drifting to the water. "It's a good place to untangle things," he said. That I looked at him, startled. "What makes you think I need untangling?" "The way you keep checking your phone," he replied gently. "Like you're waiting for something you're not sure will ever come." I felt exposed in a way I couldn't name. "Things have been complicated lately." He nodded, not pressing for more. "Complicated doesn't mean hopeless. Sometimes it just means you're finally noticing what's been wrong for a long time." His words unsettled me because they felt too close to a truth I was trying not to confront. Before I could respond, Daniel's voice echoed from outside, calling us to help with the light. Lucas stepped away, leaving me with an odd, lingering sense that he had seen through me in just a few minutes. That night, as the three of us sat on the porch listening to the water lap against the shore, I kept catching my thoughts drifting toward Lucas's quiet presence. Something about him tugged at a part of me I had buried beneath obligations, routines, and the fear of what change might mean. That I told myself it was nothing, but even then, a small, insistent voice whispered that this weekend might change more than I intended. The night felt quieter than usual. The house had finally settled into silence, with only the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the soft ticking of a clock in the living room. I had stayed up later than I expected, scrolling through my phone, but the warmth of Ryan's presence earlier still lingered. I couldn't stop replaying the small moments, the laughter, the playful teasing, the way he had handed me the blanket without a word that I decided to make myself a cup of tea and quietly stepped into the kitchen. To my surprise, Ryan was already there, leaning against the counter with a mug in his hands. He smiled at me, a soft, knowing smile that made my heart skip a beat. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked casually. That I shook my head, suddenly aware of the way my own hands trembled slightly. "Just couldn't stop thinking, I guess," I admitted, forcing a laugh. He chuckled, a low, gentle sound that made the air feel heavier somehow. "Yeah, me too." There was a pause, and then he leaned a little closer to me, not in a way that felt uncomfortable, but in a way that made me hyper-aware of how close we were. The distance between us seemed to shrink with every second, and I realized my chest was beating faster than usual. We talked quietly, about nothing important, childhood memories, school mishaps, movies we liked. But even in the ordinary words, there was an unusual intimacy, a tension that neither of us mentioned but that hung between us, heavy and impossible to ignore. Every glance, every smile, every casual brush of the hand seemed charged with something more than friendship. At one point, I tripped over my own foot, and Ryan caught me instinctively. His hands were steady, warm, and lingering just a moment longer than necessary. I felt a strange heat rush through me and quickly pulled back, pretending to adjust my mug. But the look in his eyes told me he had noticed, too, the small flutter of nerves, the subtle attraction that neither of us had acknowledged. Later, we ended up back in the living room. Ryan suggested we watch another movie, and I agreed, thinking a distraction might help calm my racing thoughts. We sat close on the couch, far closer than normal. The blanket was thrown over both of us again, but this time, it felt different. Somehow, the warmth between us felt more intense, more intimate, yet completely innocent on the surface. I told myself it was just comfort, just familiarity, but every instinct in my body screamed that there was more. During a quiet moment, Ryan nudged my shoulder lightly, teasing me about something I had said earlier. His playful grin made my stomach twist in ways I hadn't expected. I laughed, trying to sound casual, but my mind was spinning. I realized that the connection between us wasn't just the bond of step-siblings anymore, it was something entirely new, something complicated, and deeply personal. And then it happened, the moment I wasn't expecting. I dozed off for just a minute, leaning against the couch, exhausted from the emotional whirlwind of the day. When I woke, I realized Ryan had draped the blanket more fully over me and was sitting closer than before, almost protectively. His expression was calm, yet there was a softness in his eyes that made my chest tighten. I froze, unsure what to say or do. His presence felt comforting but also confusing. That I looked down at my hands, feeling the weight of my thoughts. I had never experienced this before, a mixture of attraction, nervousness, and trust so powerful it was almost overwhelming. My mind raced. Was I feeling too much? Was this wrong? But even as I questioned myself, a small part of me didn't want it to end, didn't want the night to pass without acknowledging the closeness we shared. Ryan broke the silence, his voice gentle. "Alex, are you okay?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. There was concern, but also an unspoken question in his tone. I nodded quickly, fumbling for words. Yeah, I'm fine." But I knew he could see through the lie. For the rest of the night, we stayed close but didn't speak much. There was an understanding, unspoken but real, that something had shifted between us. The surprise wasn't in what had happened, it was in how much I cared about it, in how much I noticed him, and in how much my own feelings had grown overnight. As I finally climbed into bed, I realized that the night had been more than just a sleepover. It had been the start of something entirely unexpected, something I couldn't quite define yet. And deep down, I knew that the morning would bring questions I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. The morning light slipped through the blinds, casting pale stripes across the apartment walls. Ethan lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his body still beside Michael's but his mind far away. The kiss from the night before replayed endlessly, each memory sharp with both exhilaration and shame. He hadn't slept, turning over again and again the same question: what did it mean, and what would he do now? Michael stirred next to him, stretching before pressing a soft kiss against Ethan's shoulder. "You were quiet last night," he murmured. "Everything okay?" Ethan forced a nod. "Just tired. Long day." It was a lie, and he knew it. Michael accepted the explanation without hesitation, as he always did, his trust unwavering. That trust felt heavier than any accusation could. Later that morning, while Michael busied himself with errands, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand. A new message glowed on the screen. "Last night wasn't a mistake. Don't pretend it didn't mean something." The words from Daniel sent a shiver through him. His thumb hovered over the keyboard, torn between deleting the message and answering it. In the end, he did neither. He simply locked the phone and shoved it face down on the table, as though hiding it could erase the truth it carried. Days passed, but the distance between Ethan and Michael grew impossible to ignore. Michael asked questions, small ones at first. "Are you stressed at work? Did something happen with your family?" Ethan brushed them aside, always with the same refrain, "I'm fine, just tired." But Michael's eyes lingered on him longer now, suspicion flickering at the edges of his usual warmth. Daniel, meanwhile, refused to fade into silence. Another message came. Then another. Sometimes playful, sometimes pointed, but always reminding Ethan of the current running between them. Each vibration of his phone was a reminder of the boundary he had already crossed and the pull of what might follow. Eventually, Ethan agreed to meet him again. He told himself it was just to talk, to clear the air, but deep down he knew he was lying. The second meeting came easily, too easily. Daniel's presence was intoxicating, his laughter sparking the same restless energy Ethan had been craving. One meeting became two, and then more, each time leaving Ethan with a heavier conscience and a sharper ache of guilt. At home, Michael's gestures of care began to cut in unexpected ways. The way he made Ethan tea without asking. The way he reached for his hand while watching television. The way he leaned his head on Ethan's shoulder, trusting, unguarded. Every act of kindness was a mirror reflecting Ethan's betrayal, forcing him to confront the widening rift between who he wanted to be and who he was becoming. One evening, Michael cooked Ethan's favorite meal. The effort was obvious, candles lit, the table carefully set, soft music playing in the background. Ethan sat across from him, heart heavy, the meal tasting of ash despite the care put into it. "Are you happy?" Michael asked suddenly, his voice quiet but steady. The question struck harder than any accusation. Ethan opened his mouth, but the words tangled in his throat. He wanted to say yes, to reassure Michael, to hold on to the stability they had built. But another part of him, restless and guilty, whispered no. He forced a smile, swallowing the truth. "Of course I am." Michael studied him for a moment, then nodded, choosing, at least for now, to believe the answer. That night, while Michael drifted into sleep beside him, Ethan sat at the edge of the bed, phone in hand again. A new message from Daniel glowed on the screen. "You can't keep pretending. You know where you belong." Ethan didn't reply. He didn't delete it either. He simply stared, torn between the life he had built with Michael and the fire Daniel represented. The screen dimmed, plunging the room into darkness, but the weight of the choice remained. Ethan lay back down, his arm draped around Michael as though nothing had changed. Yet inside, he knew everything had. He closed his eyes, caught in the silence of the night, aware that his double life was unsustainable. But for now, he remained in the in-between, neither confessing nor committing, trapped in a quiet betrayal that grew heavier with every passing day. And as the city outside settled into sleep, Ethan realized he wasn't sure how long he could keep carrying the secret, or how long it would be before it carried him to ruin. A few days had passed since that weekend at Ryan's place, and life had returned to its usual rhythm. But something within me had changed. The closeness, the unspoken connection, the way he had made me feel, it lingered like a quiet echo, impossible to ignore. I found myself thinking about him at odd moments, during lunch, on walks, even while studying. Each thought carried a mix of warmth, curiosity, and a little nervous excitement. That I realized that what had happened wasn't just a fleeting moment. It had shown me a side of myself I hadn't fully understood. Feelings could be complicated, unexpected, and even confusing, but that didn't make them wrong. In fact, acknowledging them made me feel more in control of my own emotions, more honest with myself. That I remembered Ryan's words that morning, the way he had admitted he felt the same. That simple admission had made all the difference. There was no pressure, no rush, just understanding, trust, and mutual respect. It made me think about the kind of relationship I wanted, not just with Ryan, but with everyone around me. Real connections weren't always about grand gestures or dramatic confessions. Sometimes, they were quiet, subtle, and built on small moments of care and attention. One evening, I found myself scrolling through photos of the weekend. There were no selfies, no snapshots of us being overly familiar, just small images of places we had visited, the snack table he had prepared, even the blanket we had shared on the couch. Each memory brought a smile to my face. I realized that sometimes, the moments that change us most are the ones that seem ordinary at first. That I also thought about the future. How would we navigate this unusual bond? Would it remain unspoken forever, a secret understanding between us? Or would there come a day when we needed to speak openly about what we felt? The questions were endless, but for the first time, I didn't feel the panic I usually did when faced with uncertainty. Instead, I felt hope, a quiet hope that whatever happened next, we could handle it with honesty and care. That I decided to reach out to Ryan, not about confessions or feelings, but just to check in. A simple message: "Hey, just thinking about that weekend. Hope you're doing well." His reply was almost instant: "I've been thinking about it too. I'm glad we got to spend that time together." That short exchange was enough to remind me that the bond we had built was real, and that it didn't need words to prove its significance. Sometimes I replayed little moments in my mind: the shared blanket, the laughter over simple jokes, the way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't noticing. And with each replay, I felt grateful. Grateful for the weekend, for the trust we had shared, and for the unexpected way my heart had opened. That I realized that feelings didn't always need a label. What mattered was honesty, respect, and understanding. Ryan and I had discovered something rare, a connection that was meaningful, safe, and profound. And even if we never fully defined it, it had already changed us both. As I looked forward, I felt a quiet determination. I would continue to nurture that connection, to remain honest with myself and with him. Life was unpredictable, and emotions were complicated, but that weekend had taught me a simple truth: some surprises, the ones that make your heart race and your mind reflect, are worth embracing. And so, I carried that feeling with me, a reminder that connection, care, and understanding could appear in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes, the most profound experiences come when you least expect them.